Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We're here. I wasn't as late as I thought I was going to be, so um, yay for me. Hello, Cherie and Alice and Kay. It's good to see you guys.
Hello.
Yeah,
Hello,
Hello.
hello. Um, so we're going to talk about chapter 8. Um, I've been looking forward to it for a while and not looking forward to it for a while, if that makes sense. Please forgive me if I get emotional. I don't think I will, but it's possible. So if I do, just get past the blubbering. Because I think I've been telling you guys for weeks now. Well, the four of us, I guess it's just the four of us, but you all four, the three of you know how emotional this chapter was for me, and I read it. I probably read it and recorded it 5 times, and edited it for hours when I finally got one that I felt like was the least blubbery. Um, because it was just that emotional for me. I don't even really know why, but it really was just emotional. It was just the heartstrings, the heart tugging and stuff that was the hardest. Hi, Catnip.
because it was from a parent's point of view. That's why it got you so much.
I think so. I think so. Yeah, it was a tough one. But um, anyway, so I'm gonna go ahead. Glad to have you in the chat, Catnet. It's a good thing there's nobody else there because I didn't get any links ready for Cat for this one. Um, but I will tell you guys that there's a lot of news information about this case in the if you Google Jim Fowler, or well, Mark Fowler would be the better one. Jim Fowler he's still very, very active in Oklahoma. Do you ever hear anything about him, Kay, or is
No,
it? uh,
no, I don't know anything about him.
okay. All right. Well, so as I've mentioned in the past, this is a very emotional chapter. And I think what I'll do, and Kay, did you want to like kind of like be often we just kind of let you go and talk about your thoughts and feelings and what Daniel has said, but I do know that Daniel did not read chapter 8. He has become very unhappy. Hi, Colette. Welcome. He's become very unhappy with the book, just because of his experience. How can you blame? You can't blame him. So um, I will try to share if I can manage it. I will try to share parts of the Kindle pages. I don't want to get in trouble with YouTube or copyrights or anything like that. So I will probably just kind of skip over some pages, but there are definitely some parts that I want to read kind of verbatim. So I will. Oh, what happened to Kay? Um, but I'm going to go ahead and get us kind of started. So there she is. Let me hit this button here. This chapter is called A Robbery Gone Wrong. And God, I feel like I just said that just like I did in the recording, didn't I, Alice?
Yeah.
A robbery gone wrong. Because every time I read it, I knew what was coming. And so every time I said the title, I was like, robbery gone wrong. Oh, I'm getting a little, what is it? Yeah, a little jaded, I guess, knowing what's already coming. So I will see if I can figure out, there it is, how to share this. I think I've done this a couple of times at the risk of getting into trouble with YouTube. But I'm lost. I can't find oh, there I am. Where am I? Okay, there we go. I can find which tab I was looking for. Um, so this, like I said, it's called A Robbery Gone Wrong. And it starts out, It says, in a crime with two suspects, particularly a murder committed during a robbery attempt, it is common for police and prosecutors to get one of the suspects to roll. In return for a signed statement and testimony at trial, the cooperating suspect will usually get special consideration, like a reduced sentence. But not if you live in where? Oklahoma County. So things are much different in Oklahoma County. And so Bob Macy, if even if there wasn't evidence of two, he would find a way to make evidence for two and convict and sentence to death as many as he could. It's just the way it was. It's just true. So this starts out with a two young men who go into a like a basic hometown grocery store. I believe, I can't remember, what is it called, Win Foods or something like that. I actually think they have a small chain or what, or across the country, because I think I've heard of them. But anyway, these two young men go in, like in the middle of the night. Mark Fowler and Cherie. Okay, what's the other guy's name? What's the other one's name?
Fox.
Billy Ray Fox.
Billy Ray Fox. Yes, thank you. And they go in with a weapon and they gather together the three employees who are there to, open the store or whatever they're going to do early in the morning. And this was in, I want to say it was either Edmond or Norman, Oklahoma. Edmond, thank you. And so they go in and they herd the three employees that are in there into the back room, to the stock room or the storeroom, and they all three end up getting murdered, all three of these young kids. And so now what's his name, Bob Macy, would have you believe that both of the young men, Mark Fowler and Billy Ray Fox, both had a hand in killing these young men. And what had happened was the morning employee who comes in and gets the donuts or the bakery things ready in the morning, early in the morning, she came in and the store was unusually quiet. She expected to see the other guys in there working and getting ready to open or whatever. And her mom had gone in with her because her mom wanted to buy cigarettes. And when she got in there, it was just really quiet. And so she went to the back storeroom and she sees them all three kind of laying in like a semicircle kind of thing, I guess. And she thinks they're all just back there, laying down on the floor playing a joke on her. So she's kind of like kicking at them, come on, guys, it's time to get up and go to work, quit screwing around. And she turns to walk out and then she realizes that none of them moved and nobody got up and, went to follow her out. And then, of course, she saw the blood on the floor and realized that they were gravely injured, if not dead. And as it turns out, they were dead. So the case just opens up wide from there. And in the book, it says Bob Macy didn't like cutting deals on high-profile murder cases. And like I said, if there were two suspects involved, he would make sure he could prosecute both of them if he could. And if he couldn't, he would find a way to do it and make sure they both got the death penalty. And so there's a line in here, and it reminds me very much of Ken Pratt's in the Avery case. Bob Macy, in one drive-by shooting case, Bob Macy won separate death penalty convictions for one shooter and the driver. And in another case, he convicted two men in separate trials, just like Stephen and Brendan, of shooting a convenience store clerk. And he argued in each trial that the defendant was the shooter, only one shot was fired. So very, very reminiscent, right, of Stephen and Brendan.
Yep.
I think it was.
Yeah, I thought of that too.
Yeah, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that Kratz said that there was only one person responsible for the death of Teresa Halbach in Stephen's trial.
Yep.
Yet, right?
Yep.
Only one person is responsible for the death of this young woman. And then he turns around and has a trial and, tries Brendan Dassey for the same crime. It just, it defies all logic for sure. But that's what he did. That's just the kind of dirty prosecutor that he was as well. And so there's this case that goes on with Fox and Fowler. And sorry, just had a window open that and he prosecutes both of these suspects for a murder that could only have been committed by one. And it says, or for the problems with the evidence presented by Joyce Gilchrist, although both factors were present in this case, but because Mark Furman's investigation brought him into contact with Jim Fowler, who was the father of Mark Fowler. And he says that Jim Fowler, who more than any other person made me begin to re-examine my opinion concerning the death penalty. And remember, Mark Furman comes from Southern California, LAPD, and really big on the death penalty. So for him to, when I read that, it was really impactful to me when he said that it made that this case, that Jim Fowler, the father of Mark Fowler, made him re-examine his opinion concerning the death penalty. To me, that was a big deal. So that's kind of how it starts. One of the guys, let's see, there were three men, like I said, and one of them was Rick Cast, Chupan Chowison, and the other one's name was John Barrier. And so John Barrier was a 27-year-old manager trainee. He was working, training to be the manager of the store. He had been stabbed and beaten to death. And the 33-year-old night manager, who was Cast, had been, I believe he'd been beaten in the head with the shotgun, and then Chowison, I think, was just shot in the head. I don't remember all those details. If you guys can remember, you can correct me.
Yeah, I think it was two of them was shot in the head and one of them was beaten to death.
Beaten to death, right? And I believe it was known that the beating took place with the butt of the shotgun. So, of course, this was Bob Macy lived in Edmond, and he, had been a frequent shopper, a regular shopper at that store. And I don't know, Kay would have to answer this or can answer it better than I, but seems to me like it's a small town, or do you have any idea, Kay?
It is a suburb. I mean, it's a suburb of Oklahoma City, but they just kind of run together. You never really realize where one ends and the next begins. But it's not a small place. I mean, it's a large city.
Okay.
But these local Winn-Dixie IGA stores, that I don't know, I guess those are regional, but we had a lot of those in Oklahoma City back then.
Yeah. I said that I thought we have a lot of IGA, and I think it's IGA that is the national, and then I think they can name them their own names, like franchises or something, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I meant to say in Oklahoma, not Oklahoma City, but
yeah. I only heard you say Oklahoma. That's what I thought you had said. It was, of course, it was so for the area, or at least at the time. And forgive me, I have forgotten what year it was. I'm sure one of you remember. As many times as I read it, you should think I would have it memorized, but I don't. But
90 something, I think it was. Was it 91 or something like that?
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Yeah, I think it was 91, because I'm sure they got sentenced in 2000. if I remember right, or something like that.
Okay, yeah, it's that sounds about right. So, but it was,
Oh,
you know, how
85. Sorry, it was
85.
85. Yeah, the 3rd of July, 85 was when Carrie arrived at work and
Okay,
found them in the back of the shop.
okay, all right, cool. Yeah, I know it was really, really long time ago.
Yeah.
Uh, couldn't remember when, but so the population was probably a little smaller then, but it just I don't know, the way it was described in the book to me sounded like a very small or tight knit community. Is just kind of the impression that I got from it. But so um, it uh, Bob Macy, no one was more outraged than Bob Macy himself, who lived in Edmond at the time and he shopped at that store. He had been summoned by the Edmond Police Department, and when he arrived in he got to the supermarket while the crime scene was still being processed and the bodies were still there. They hadn't been removed yet, and he said it's a horrible crime, totally needless crime. Macy told the reporters if they had executed Roger Dale Stafford, this wouldn't have happened. And so, what that is in reference to, Stafford had been awaiting execution for killing 6 people in a sirloin stockade steakhouse. And at that time, when that happened, that was Oklahoma's worst mass murder that had taken place. Um, So he'd been convicted of killing those 6 people plus 3 other murders the Stafford guy had, and Macy didn't wasn't the prosecutor for that case, but he was, he was hungry for the death penalty, and he just couldn't wait to see him executed, and he finally was executed on July 1st of 1995. But um, everybody in the town was shocked by the crime. There was like $2,700 taken from the cash register, and the safe that was in the office had not been opened. So uh, there was an award announced. The Winds management had offered a $10,500 reward for information leading to the arrest of the suspects for the murders. Um, Anybody want to jump in and add anything before? Oh, thanks, Kate. So Edmond, Oklahoma's population is 81,000. Is that like currently, do you know, or
That's current, yes.
currently? Okay. So in 85, it could have been, you know, a little bit less for sure. But at any rate, like I said, I got the feeling it was a tight knit community. What was that, Cherie?
Maybe you said this already, but another thing I think I learned it from the Julius Jones documentary that it's kind of like an upscale neighborhood, or at least more compared to the northeast section of Oklahoma that we usually
It's a
call Oklahoma
preferred
City.
it is a preferred city to live in. It is I don't know. I think
Oh,
I think the prosecutors and judges and
Yeah, like Macy lived there.
oh, well, yeah. Okay, there you go. That's a good
And
way
I
to look
mean,
at it.
$10,500 back in 85 would have been a lot of money.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Now it would be like that's all you got? I ain't saying shit kind of thing,
Yeah.
probably. Um, so finally, somebody did decide to come forward. Uh, Billy, let's see, Billy Ray Fox um, had admitted to his roommate that he had been involved in the crime. And uh, a guy by the name of Chris Glasner, and Roger's brother, Jimmy Collins. He had admitted it to the two of them, 2 roommates, and so. uh, they they went to the police and told the police that Collins, one of the guys, Jimmy Collins, said that they had approximately 2:30 the previous morning that Fox and Jimmy Fox and nope, Jimmy Fox and Mark Fowler had gone to him and borrowed 2 shotguns from them. And when Fox returned that morning, because Fowler, I guess, lived at home. I'm not really sure where he lived, but when Fox returned home at 7 o'clock that morning, he brought back one of the shotguns, and he said something like, "Man, I fucked up. I killed some people." And Fox and Glazner went into the living room and turned on the TV, and it was on the news. And he's kind of like, "Yeah, I did that." And I didn't get the sense that he was like, "Yeah, man, look at me, I killed those." I got the sense that he knew he really screwed up and killed people, and I don't think he intended to do it. But when you carry shotguns someplace, with an intention of robbing people, bad things can happen. And so he says, that's what it's about. I killed 2 of them, then I killed the third one. So Fox, Jimmy Fox, is it Jimmy, or I'm saying Billy Fox?
Yeah.
He he admitted to Glazner that he had killed all 3 of them, and he hit the third one over the head with the gun, is what he said. Is where that, and it said that he apologized to Glazner for breaking his shotgun that the roommate had lent to him. And he also said that Mark Fowler had stabbed the third victim, and he asked his roommates to alibi him for that time period. And but later that night, Billy Fox was arrested. He was going out to his pickup truck outside of the residence, and he saw the police coming towards him, and he handed whoever was with him, he handed him a wad of cash, and got it off of his hands. And in the bed of the truck, they found bloody splinters from the broken shotgun um, that he had beat the one victim with. And he found I don't know what a gun's for stock is, but he found that and some spent shell casings. There was a T-shirt in there that had blood on it, that looked like a knife had been wiped with had the blood wiped off of the knife. And later on the next morning, Fox told the police where he could find a white purse that contained checks from the grocery store cash register. And then the shotgun barrel was found hidden beneath some debris and whatever in Fox's backyard. And Billy Fox had worked at the IGA store as a night clerk in December of 1983, but then he was fired in January of 1985. He didn't have a criminal record prior to that. But if I recall, there were drugs. He was on drugs, using drugs a lot. And drug addicts, when they don't have a job anymore, they usually tend to turn to sometimes pretty serious crimes to get what they need. And so even though he didn't have a criminal record, he he took some of the money that they had stolen and went on a shopping spree at one of the nearby malls, I guess. I mean, he was buying a bunch of clothes and jewelry. Anything to add to that so far, girls? Okay.
You're covering it pretty well.
Oh, well, you know me, I tend to give way too much detail, so don't let me
See,
like read the whole chapter.
well, it says that 20-year-old Fowler was arrested at his girlfriend's apartment. Fowler's was 3 years prior, he'd been convicted of car theft and credit card fraud in prison.
Right. So Fowler had a criminal history, which wasn't good for him. And even though it's there's proof that he didn't kill any of these guys. He's got a criminal history where Billy Fox didn't. So I don't know, what, if anything, that means. But, certainly if you've got a criminal record, you're going to have, it's going to be a little tougher on you for sure. So, of course, when the guys were interviewed by police, they each had, a different story. And Fox said that it was Fowler who had uh, forced all three of these victims into the back storeroom, and he had done that at gunpoint, and that he was out in the front of the store still, and he heard shots, and they um, he was freaking out, so they grabbed whatever money they could get, whatever checks they could get, and they took off. Um, uh, then he said while Fox said while he was gathering up all the money and everything, he heard another shot, and then he saw he had went to the before he left the store. He went back to the stock room, and he's like, "Hey man, what's going on?" This is what he's telling police. What's going on back here? And just as he got there, he said that he saw Fowler beat the third victim over the head with a shotgun. So that was Billy Fox's version of the events. And Fowler told police that Fox had been carrying the shotgun, and that the employees recognized Fox because he used to work there. And they were chit-chatting with him, and Fowler said that he didn't even go into the storeroom until he heard two shots, and then when he entered the storeroom, he saw the two bodies on the floor. And Fowler said, "I freaked out, man. It was over with, and people were gone. There was no reason for them people to die, kind of like I got set up in this deal." And so it's hard though when even though we're supposed to, our minds are, innocent until proven guilty. That even back in '85, with Bob Macy, there was no such thing as innocent. It was just always guilty in his mind. So Mark's father is Jim Fowler, and Jim Fowler was the son of a law enforcement official, and he was a devout Catholic, like, really serious practicing Catholic. And at the time, Jim Fowler believed that criminals should pay for their crimes. And, if somebody's committed a crime that's a death penalty crime, then, that's what they get. That's what they deserve. That's what you have to pay for it. And then, of course, when his son, was in this situation, it said in this case, he was torn between his sense of justice and his love for his son. And that's pretty much where my lumps in my throat started to gather. Because
Yeah, you could tell with the recording in your voice that it was getting to you.
yeah, because it's just like you said, Alice. We're thinking. I'm thinking of it as the point of view as a parent, And
Yeah.
when I did support the death penalty, I used to think about that all the time. Man, what if it was one of my kids or somebody that was close to me that I loved? And one of my sons and I had a long conversation about the death penalty. And I was telling him why I supported it and why I believed, it was, you know, right and just, and it was, how
A
you get
life for a
justice.
life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And he was just asking me, not disrespectfully, but my son was just putting questions to me, well, what about if, I can't remember all the little scenarios he was giving me, but I was like, well, then, and he's like, well, Mom, do you support the death penalty or not? And I was like, no, I support the death penalty. So
Yeah.
doesn't matter what the reason is, you think they should be executed. And I was like, yes. So,
hmm Yeah.
so I'm
Oh,
gonna
I've been
go
there
ahead.
myself. I mean, I had the same thoughts, especially when it came to like pedophiles and child killers and things like that. I'm like, no, a life for a life, and they deserve it, and everything like that. And then my thoughts were, well, if you're not going to sentence them to death, put them in a women's prison, and then accidentally tell them what they've done, and I guarantee you they'll come out of there in a box.
Exactly.
you
Exactly.
know.
Let the women at them.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and that's the way I thought about it. But I mean, as they say, the older you get, the wiser you get, or supposed to anyway. Um, and you see things, and you hear things, and then you see people like Stephen and Brendan, and you're like, no way, and it just changes your whole thought pattern in a sense, you know?
Yeah. And I'm not going to speak for Kay and Cherie, even though we've had this conversation many times, but I I changed my opinion about the death penalty when I realized that innocent men were, and women, innocent men though mostly, were being executed for crimes they didn't commit. And then I was like, no. And I think it was Cherie that I've seen and heard this from, but we can never be 100% certain that somebody committed the crime, the death penalty crime. And so, you can't say, if you can't be 100% certain, then how can you be, willing to
Yep,
administer the death penalty?
yep.
So yeah, so I won't speak for Cherie, but I'm pretty sure it was her that I heard that from, something to that effect.
Yeah,
Cherie. Yeah,
you can't say, whoops, sorry, because they're already gone.
Yep.
that's right. So yeah, Mark Fowler ultimately ended up, admitting that he helped to plan the crime, the robbery, but he adamantly denied that he killed any of the three. And his dad, Jim, believed him. Um, and he knew that his son was going to prison, and he wanted to do what he could to save his life, because by now, they already know that Macy's going to be seeking the death penalty for both of these guys. Um, so when an so it kind of says again that when an accomplice in an armed robbery that results in a murder can be reasonably eliminated as the killer, and if he agrees to testify against the other suspect or suspects, it's common to redo. It's kind of like the plea deal thing. You roll over on these guys, and we'll take the death penalty off the table for you. And so they kind of expected that, um, that if one or the other, and Macy didn't care which one it was, he didn't care who rolled, but he would, or he wouldn't have cared, but it didn't matter. Even if one of them had rolled on the other, he was still going to try, charge them both with murder and ask for the death penalty. But normally, in some other less dirty prosecutions, the prosecution or the state may say, offer that deal, and only one gets the death penalty, but not in this case. um, uh, it's usually very powerful leverage to ensure a conviction of both, but for one for sure, to get the heavier sentence, but not it, like I said, not in most of Macy's cases. um, So, but it's the law. It's, they're allowed to do that. And I can't remember what it's called, exactly, but um, it's pretty much, if you're there when the murder was committed, even if you weren't involved in it, if you didn't kill the person, you're an accomplice to it. And so you can be charged with murder. And I don't think it's always been that way. I think that's been a fairly recent or newer law in many states, to do that.
It's the felony murder rule.
Felony murder. There you go. I knew there was a name.
Yeah. I mean, I know this is a bit off topic, but that's what happened to Dog the Bounty Hunter. Apparently, he was in a car with a friend, and the friend went into this house and shot somebody in the house, but because he was in the car, not necessarily involved in it, but because he was in just the car alone, he got charged and sentenced to so many years in jail for being part of it. And that was back in the 70s, I think. So,
Oh, Oh, I didn't know that about him. Oh, interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I realized I probably better get that book off the screen all the time. It definitely will get me in trouble. Yeah, I didn't know that about Dog. That's interesting. Um, well, and yeah. So yeah, felony murder rule. And so again, I don't know if that's a state by state thing or county or cities or what. Uh, but you know, it certainly was allowable.
It says in most states, the act of engaging in felony uh, that results in murder in grounds of first-degree murder. In California, is called the felony murder rule, and Oklahoma has a similar law.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's you know what Bob Macy used. It says even if Mark was involved with the death of John Barrier, a plea deal with Fowler could have ensured the death sentence against Billy Ray Fox, because most of the evidence pointed against Fox anyway, as the instigator, the robbery plot, and the killer of at least two of the victims. And you know, if Macy would have been willing to cut a deal with Mark Fowler, he could have saved, you know, could have saved himself a lot of trouble. But you know what? He didn't. I don't get the sense that Bob Macy ever considered it trouble. If he could get the death penalty for, you know, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8 people in one murder, I think he reveled in it. It seems like.
I think
But
his whole thing, I think that was his whole thing. You know, he was trying to, whether that was a little game with himself or whatever, but, you know, he was trying to get as many death penalty convictions as he could. You know, he just wanted to be the guy who was, you know, don't mess with me, tough on crime. And I mean, that's still so appealing to most of the people in the state.
just blows my mind.
I
Blows.
mean, yeah, I mean, coming up in the book when it's talking about, um, you know, how they manipulated people by using the press, which is the same thing they did in Daniel's case. You know, they're talking about, they're convincing everyone that, you know, you really have to um, pursue the death penalty, because otherwise they might get out, they might be eligible for parole in 7 years.
Oh, that's right. I forget about that law in Oklahoma. Gosh,
um,
yeah, that's
Although I don't
crazy.
ever see that happening, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, so it's 7 to life. Is that what it would be? 7 years to life?
yeah,
Okay.
um,
Okay.
yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, please take over.
Macy and his assistant DAs had pounded this issue, the issue of the possibility of someone only doing 7 years for this. They pounded this issue into the public consciousness through a series of speeches and media comments. Yeah, that's how they roll.
Yep.
That sounds a little bit like brainwashing to me.
Well, you know, they make sure that there's not a fair jury out there.
Yeah. And we know that just from, you know, Daniel's case. We know that it, like, you know, like I've said all along, these guys, Macy and Gilchrist and that whole, you know, era of time, officials, they left a big legacy for the current courts and states and, you know, prosecution and things. And what you guys have currently in Oklahoma is carrying out that legacy really, really well.
Yeah, what we
Yeah,
have now.
Gilchrist 2.0.
What's that, Alice?
I says, yeah, Gilchrist 2.0.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I like that. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, all the people in this book trained the people that we're dealing with right now.
Yeah.
Exactly, Kay. Exactly. That's why I say Gilchrist 2.0, because the bad habits that Gilchrist had, we know fine well now that Taylor had enough. So, and just as dirty.
That's right. Well, so Macy wanted to he wanted to try them both together. And I feel like at some point there was an agreement there was an agreement or something or talk of try them separately, but the judge said nope. Just a month later, he said nope. We're gonna go ahead and try these guys together for the same murder, so that they could both, so that they could go both be get of the death for the death penalty. And Judge David Cook. We need to look at that one. I mean, I know he's long gone, but still.
I'm not familiar with that name.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean, the
that
fact that the defence, both the attorneys for Fox and Fowler, only had a month
yeah,
to prepare a defence. A month. You know what I mean? A decent investigation should take as long as it takes. You
yeah,
know what I mean? If they can get enough evidence in that to make a conviction in 6 months, then good on them. But the majority of the time, an investigation like that can take anything up to a year. I mean, here, if I remember correctly, some court cases they'll get taken up to court right away, and then that'll be they're either getting let out on bail or they're getting remanded into custody until the court date. Now, if the police and that didn't come back with any evidence for a year and a half, then they're sitting in the jail for the year and a half until the investigation is done and the police are supposed to have a good case. But we're seeing that that's different with the Luke and Jody case, but the majority of the time that's how it's supposed to work. But to give them a month, I mean, that's not a fair trial in itself.
right. Well, and that was because of Gilchrist. She didn't get her. I mean, and it was at that point initially they were going to be tried separately, but Gilchrist didn't. She drug her feet. She was late getting all of her evidence. I use the word loosely, turned in, and so by the time she finally got it turned in, was like 2 weeks before the trial was supposed to start, and Macy's like, oh nope, we're going to do it separately, and the judge said yep, or together, and the judge said yep, we're doing it together. Catnip says, do you think it was more important? Do you think it was more than that with Macy, more than just prestige, ego, money, etc., possibly something psychological? I
Yes.
think so.
Yes.
Well, I mean, don't you think that the people that like him that you see, they're all power tripping. They're all, I mean, this is a person who has, the district attorney has more power than almost anyone else in the state. Really, I mean, I really think that's the most powerful position in the state. I mean, I know the governor can do things, but as far as messing up people's lives, he spent a lot of years using his office to make things roll his way or someone else's way, or to get back at people because, they didn't march in line like he thought.
He had a god complex.
Mhm.
Yes.
But we see that over again. I mean, we're seeing that right now too.
Yeah.
Prater's been in office a long time, and he's used to being able to exact the outcome that he wants.
Mm-hmm. And not only has he been in office for a long time, but how many years did he serve in law enforcement before he became the
Oh yeah,
DA?
I mean, he was already well connected.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
yeah.
Definitely.
Well, it's gross. I mean, it's gross how
I agree.
someone can destroy so many lives and go have a nice glass of wine.
Yeah. Well, what it makes me think of is, a psychopath will do, things that are, some of them are outrageous things, some of them are small but hurtful things, but a psychopath will do hurtful, damaging, devastating things. And not have any remorse or empathy or regret for having done it. And that's what I think of with Macy, that he was a psychopath, not in the sense that he was a crazed killer, but not
No,
every psychopath is a crazed killer. So
no, he loved the admiration that people were getting him, because as far as they were concerned, he was doing his job. He was catching the criminals. He was taking the life for a life. If it was um, a young woman that was murdered or a child that was murdered, or he was getting the bastard, if you want to put it that way. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So he loved the admiration and everything like that. So yeah, there was definitely something psychological there, because what was it 78 executions or something like that he had under his belt?
I
Something.
78 death penalty convictions, I know.
Right,
uh,
right.
I don't know exactly how many of them, I mean, some of them are still on death row, so I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe I've just got it wrong in the memory. But I knew that it was 70 something. So yeah, you're right, Rhonda. I think it was the convictions. No, the actually sentenced to death. I think it was the convictions. But he
oh
was a
no,
nasty piece of work. He was a nasty, nasty piece of work.
yeah, he really was. And sorry, I'm just replying to a little message I just got here. Yeah, that's really sad. Um, so Catnip, he basically kind of had the same. I don't know. I mean, I've never seen or looked for anything, any kind of a psychological evaluation or anything,
I don't
or
think anything exists like that.
probably not. In part, somebody has to agree that they might have a bit of a problem in order to to seek out that kind of counseling or that kind of help.
I
And
could see, couldn't you see that, in the end, when everything came down with Gilchrist and Macy and all that, that something like that could have been forced at that time
yeah,
but that didn't happen.
yeah,
So,
yeah. We don't have any evidence that he ever had any kind of a psychological workup of any kind. So, unfortunately, but the narcissistic, antisocial, psychopathic mind doesn't believe they've done anything wrong at all, and so they don't. And I'm not a doctor and I'm not a psychologist, but I've studied enough and I've worked with these people enough that I know how it kind of works. And so, but those personality disorder traits, there's no um, admitting wrong of any kind or showing empathy or regret or remorse. So he would had to have known, gosh, something's not right in my head. I think I need to see somebody, and there's just no way that he was going to do that. So
No.
yeah, and especially when you're getting as much attention as you are, because we have to remember, and Kay will tell you this, Oklahoma has always been a very red state, and I'm not trying to get political, but there's something to that. So
well, I mean, just the typical way that the issues line up on which side. And that just happens to be a lot of people who believe strongly in the death penalty is simply what it translates to in this case.
right, yeah, yep, definitely.
Hmm.
So yeah. So initially, like I said, they were going to both be tried separately. But 2 weeks before Fox's trial was supposed to be first, and 2 weeks before his trial was to start, um, both his trial attorney and Fowler's trial attorney, which was supposed to start immediately after Fox's, they were both delayed because of Joyce Gilchrist not getting her forensic testing and sending it to the defense and discovery. Which is, this is like old news. I'm just like, oh yeah, we know this. We know these things about her. But once she did finish the lab reports, Macy said, oh yeah, well, according to these lab reports, we can try these guys together. So that's how that ended up happening. And so, um, Gilchrist said that, there was hair evidence, and it was very important because it placed both of the guys in the storeroom, in the back room. And remember, Fowler said that he had never gone into the back room.
Can't you just see that note, the lab thing that probably said place both defendants in the back room.
In the storeroom, yeah.
This is what we need. This is what we need, Joyce. This is what we need.
Try to place them both in the storeroom. Very good.
Show Elaine how we do this. She's gonna do this. Can you teach Elaine? You're not going to be around forever.
She seems like the most likely one to carry on your dirty legacy, so make sure you teach her all the dirty ways. There really are a lot of parallels in a lot of these cases to Stephen and Brendan's case. That's for sure. And of course, Daniel's as well, but I think we expect that, even though he's,
especially Daniel's.
Yeah.
Especially Daniel's. Come on. The same person that tested Daniel's stuff was trained by this woman.
Yeah. Yep.
You know what I mean? So you're guaranteed that she picked up her nasty, dirty habits. Guaranteed.
Yeah. Isn't because that sucks?
Yeah, because she seen her getting away with it. So she thought she could get away with it.
Yeah.
It's the universal problem with law enforcement in general, is that Rhonda and I think it was Rhonda and I who were just talking about this recently. You end up with so much power as a member of law enforcement at whatever level you are, but you don't need any training, really. You have the least amount of education, the least amount of training, and you have the most responsibility and danger and power.
Yeah. You know what? I think it was Nosy was talking to us about that one day.
Yeah, maybe so.
She was talking about how she had spent more hours studying for her cosmetology license than what
that's right.
A cop does to become a cop. So, yeah.
But and so what they're doing is they're learning all these bad habits. They come into a culture where, can you imagine it being your first day as a police officer, how you would be treated by the other people? I don't think that it's like this friendly welcome to the club kind of thing. I don't get that feeling.
No.
I bet there's a certain amount of, hey, dude, you're going to need to prove yourself here. Who do you think you are? Look at you walking in here all cocky, former NFL hopeful, or whatever. You're too puny. You're too big. You're too,
who the hell do you think you are?
Yeah. So the people coming in, they want to be accepted into the club, and that's just what it is. It's a club.
Yep.
And you learn from the people above you. You want to impress. You want to follow the rules. You want to be a team player. But we seriously have to change who law enforcement is and how they're trained and what they're paid, because they're not paid nearly enough for the responsibility they're given.
Right. They're not paid enough to really care that much. It's funny that you're saying it that way, because there was in the Chauvin's trial, I don't know if it was this week or last week, but they were showing clips of it's just been clip after clip after clip. It's been really difficult trying to watch, but I'm wanting to see all this evidence that they're pointing out. And I can't remember which one of the officers, if it was Lane or King, both of those men were rookies. They were partnered that day together, and they were both rookies.
Mm-hmm.
And
one had been on it for 2 days, I think, 2 days, and one had only been there 4 days, but they'd only just one had just come out the academy and only been at the academy or something like that, or on that specific one for 2 months, and one had only
Yeah.
been on it for 4 months or something like that. That's how it worked.
Yeah, it was very, very, and so instead of, partnering those men with, continuing to put, not necessarily with FTOs because they had graduated or leveled up, I guess you would say, from the FTO level. So they didn't need that. But you know what? What's the harm in putting an experienced uh, driver or an experienced officer with one who's, and I listened to I'm getting way off topic here, but it's relevant to what we were just talking about. But one of the Lane, I think it was the ex for the former cop Lane. I listened to an interview that he gave, I think 2 days or 4 days after the killing of George Floyd, and he said, well, they don't put us, one of the questions that was given to him was, why would you, and why would there be two rookies partnering together? And he said, well, that's the way the department wants it. That's the way they set it up. They want to put, two new guys out there together and, kind of like throwing them in the deep end and making them learn how to swim kind of thing. And I just thought, wow, that
Yep.
is so fucked up. That is
Yep.
so way backwards to me. So,
But then you've got to say, then you've got the problem with that as well, though, is putting the new rookie with the experienced cop. What bad habits is that experienced cop going to teach the rookie?
right. One of
You
those
know?
two officers said, once they didn't find the pulse on George Floyd, one of the officers said, I can't find a pulse. Should we turn him over on his side? And then, Chauvin said,
No,
yes,
he'll stay where he
exactly.
is.
Not yet, or something.
He's like, nope, he's staying right where he is, or, something to that effect.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my gosh, it just, yeah, setting them up to fail, Kat, and possibly weeding out the weaker ones, which comes back full circle now to, you better be able to walk into the department, uh, hard and strong, and, do what we expect, almost like a gang initiation kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, you
Um,
want respect, you've got to
yeah.
earn it, boy.
Yeah. And if we say, put the guy on his belly and don't let him breathe, and, hold him down and put your knee, if we tell you to do that, you better do it. And what are you
Yeah.
going to do as a new cop? I mean, unless you're somebody like Daniel, who's like fine to go off on his own and do what he knew he wanted to do and needed to do. Plus having come to the department from the gang unit, which was probably very helpful to him in that sense, but it probably brought some buckets of crap down on his head too. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
But not only that, I mean, you've got to take into it as well that for the whistleblowers, for the ones that do want to come forward and everything like that, their jobs get threatened. I mean, they could take it to their chief of police or whatever and get told, well, what do you think you're doing? You're turning on your aim, boy. That's, you know what I mean? So it needs to be rooted out from the top to the bottom, I think, because, I mean, especially in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Because to me, there's no fear to shove anybody under the bus. I mean, Daniel was one of their own. You know what I mean? And instead of defending him and actually getting to the truth and finding the truth, they flung him under the bus and went, fuck you, pal, we'll see you later.
Right. And they have a perfect opportunity right now with what's happening with Henderson, and with the governor being able to see that, yeah, the district attorney's too tied in to Henderson, the attorney general's too tied into Henderson, they can't investigate this. That tells the whole story right there.
yeah.
But will this get swept under the rug, or will they allow it to help them clean house?
Yeah,
This is
well,
an
I mean, that's
opportunity.
where it is. It's an opportunity, and it's only the people of Oklahoma that can stand up and scream and shout about this. I mean, not just necessarily if the people, I mean, like what we're doing and everything like that, but no, everybody's going to see it. Whereas the people that live there, the people that can actually turn around and say, no, I don't want you, or, you know what I mean? They've got to scream and shout about it a bit more so that the higher ups and that can
It's
see
really
that
frustrating
this,
because the media will not cover it. You know, they've
yeah,
covered it as much as they had to,
yeah,
but that was it. You know, it was like one news cycle, and they're not staying on top of this. They're not questioning, hey, what is it with Judge Henderson and the district attorney? What is that about? What is it with Judge Henderson and Attorney General Mike Hunter? What is that?
Uh,
Let's
you know,
figure that out, why it had to go to the OSBI.
who I'm still not giving a lot of faith to, trust.
But no one's talking about it anymore. No one's asking, oh, hey, who's it going to at
Yeah.
the OSBI? Who's investigating this? What are their ties to
Yeah.
Henderson?
You know, I had I don't know if I told you this, Kay and Cherie, but I had I emailed several news people and, you know, asked them, please don't let this go. You know, you owe it to the citizens of Oklahoma County specifically. Don't let it go. Don't drop this. And I got an email reply back from Nolan Clay, Leonard Clay. I don't remember what his name is. Um, um, he's on I think he's the news, the Oklahoma. Oh gosh, so the Oklahoman has a news site too, God, I can't remember what it is, but anyway, I just said, you know, please, I emailed him directly, please don't. And about, I don't know, I'd say 8 or 9 days later, he said, um, I'll cover it, but I have my hands full with the jail killings or the jail issues right at the time, at the moment. And I was like, what? What? Yeah, I mean, you got a problem with that too, but what? I was just like,
Yeah,
you
it's a hot
asshole.
mess in here.
Yeah, I just thought it was I just thought he was a real jerk about it. There was no, you know, because I was very formal, I was very polite, very respectful, and, you know, my email, and I just get back, no capital letter at the beginning of the first word, no commas, no periods, just one sentence, all lowercase letters, no period at the end. I'm busy right now, is what it basically said. I don't have time for this Henderson crap.
I think that was on the heels of the sheriff's department having to call Oklahoma City Police Department into the county jail because
Yes,
an inmate had taken a CO hostage, and
right,
OCPD ended up shooting him. And
right.
we've had so much controversy with money. Where's the money? Who's managing the jail? It's been a freaking nightmare, and people just die left and right in there. So
Yeah.
it's
Well,
pretty disgusting situation.
and another lady just passed away in the women's side, but they
Right.
said she died of natural causes. So, you
Yeah,
know,
I'm
well,
sure
that remains to be seen. But they got a lot of carpets in the women's prison too. I'm sure there's lots of carpets and brooms going.
Yeah,
So,
Jesus.
yeah. So, you know, so as far as Nolan Clay or whatever his name is, I'll probably never hear from. But I responded. I said, "Thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate your reply." You know, and I was like, "Fuck you too," you know, you jerk. But I was nice. I was the bigger person. I am so tired of always being the bigger damn person in every little conflict. The bigger I become with all these conflicts, the fatter I'm getting. It's not working out the right way. Jesus. Oh, anyway, what were we talking about anyway? So, yeah. So, kind of, you know, getting back to this story. Of course, it was Joyce Gilchrist that, you know, jacked it all up and ended up so that they ended up doing the trials together. And there was a point in time when, of course when you're going to try them separately, one defendant is going, the defendants are going to go at each other in their trials. They're going to each say that the other guy did it. But when they forced the trials together, the both defense attorneys said, okay, you know what, we're not going to do that we're not doing that to each other. We're going to, stand on the evidence and on, testimony, whatever testimony is given, and we're not going to do any finger pointing and blaming. And I don't, clearly it didn't, clearly it didn't work out to their benefit, but it very rarely did whenever Gilchrist and Macy were involved.
Yeah.
So anyway, so they ended up, of course, trying the case together, committing or sentencing. They were both convicted. Two people convicted of the murder of three people, where only one person committed the murder. So they both were, convicted of murder, and the penalty was going to be the death penalty. And of course, Macy said that, if we did a joint trial, it would save time and money. And if they were held separately, the second trial might have a change of venue because of the publicity. So, and that's just all hogwash. That's
Like
just
there
all,
wasn't already enough publicity to have
right?
this one sent out. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So, it's just BS. That's just pretty little ribbons, on a package for him. So they did the trial together. They both got, the judge said the defendants are entitled to a fair trial, not a perfect one. And I was like, what? And I get it. I get it. They're entitled to a fair one, but to say that,
Yep.
to say that out loud, they're entitled to a fair one, not a perfect one. Oh my God. I'm like, you are an ass. So having, despite the fact that they had just barely been, told that the trials were going to be held together, the trial date was set for a month later. An editorial in the Oklahoman, because they're so nice and kind and non-biased, said, the editorial applauded Judge Cook's decision. And it says, quote, one of the glaring flaws in our criminal justice system is the amount of nitpicking over minute legal technicalities, which contribute to inordinate trial delays and, on appeal, often result in reversals of trial court verdicts or orders for new trials. And I just, end quote. And I was like, oh my God, that is just some of the most backwards thinking in my mind. But that's the way the Oklahoman was writing their articles, at least in then. I don't know about so much now. I subscribe to that damn paper just because that's, the paper that has the information usually the most. But it's really disgusting what the media is allowed to get away with. I believe in the First Amendment and I'm all for it, but not when it's, contributing to destroying lives like Daniel's or Julius Jones, or, but then keeping intact the lives of Henderson and Prater, and
No kidding.
there's just some wrong backwards. So anyway,
Did they want a speedy trial? Because I mean, the attorneys had less than a month to develop their strategies. When they learned that the trials would be joined.
They had their strategies assembled to try them separately. So
Yeah.
but then when the judge said, nope, we're doing it together and the trial's in a month, they were like, we just barely got the lying evidence from the DNA lab or the crime lab, but they didn't want a speedy trial in the sense that in the way that they got it, because of the way it ended up happening.
Yeah.
So that's at that, what it says is, by refusing to sever the cases, Judge Cook severely handicapped both Fowler and Fox's ability to present effective defenses. And after being told that the defendants were being tried together, the two attorneys had less than a month to prepare a new defense, because now they had to defend them together. The judge did that, the court did that. And the only defense that they had was for each defendant to, say that the other one had committed the killings. And but the state law, like we were saying earlier, is that only that knowing that a crime was being committed, it was enough to charge Fowler also with murder. And I just thought that was so, and it's not just these two kids. So they were kids at the time that, have had this kind of a thing. It's not just an Oklahoma thing, it goes on all over the country. So this is this is the part that Kay was talking about earlier. At that time, life without parole was not available. Under a straight life sentence, the inmate could be eligible for parole after a period of just short of 7 years. Is that still the law, Kay?
I don't know.
That's just
so.
I hope not, because that is just wrong. Just really wrong. So
You'd think I would have looked that up, but I didn't.
Well,
that's how it is.
It's not like you haven't had anything else to be looking up lately, so it's fine.
I don't know.
So anyway, so this trial goes on. There's stuff in in the middle of all this, but the trial goes on. Both of the young men are convicted and sentenced to death. The jury came back and sentenced them both to death because, like Kay said, they didn't want to take a chance that one or both of them would walk after 7 years. So, that just ties your hands. You either risk somebody getting out at 7 or 10 or even 20 years after a murder, or you just bite the bullet and say, "Oh, I'd rather just execute them, or we'll just give them death." That's really a sucky position. But that's what the law was, at least at the time. So they get convicted, they get sent to prison, to death row. Each attorney, this is what it was called. The attorneys agreed on what they called a mutual non-aggression pact, even though both defendants had already blamed the other in taped statements to the police. Their lawyers decided not to offer any evidence in testimony or arguments that the other defendant was responsible for the killings. And that they thought that was going to help to keep from Macy winning the death penalty, but it didn't work. So Macy later said, "We decided that we could successfully prosecute both of them without using their statements to the police." That is spelled arrogance to me.
Yep.
So yeah. So the boys get sent to prison, and during the trial, can't go, let this go without giving, a little more information about Gilchrist. She testified that there were 4 scalp hairs consistent with Fowler's that were found on one of the pieces of clothing of one of the victims, and another scalp hair that Gilchrist matched to Fowler's was found inside a spring that had broken off of the shotgun and lodged beneath one of the victim's body. And and she also matched a bloody hair stuck to a ring on one of the victim's finger to Billy Ray Fox's. So back to what Kay said, try to put them both in the back room. She sure did.
So
she was a lot
wait
more
a minute, he got shot and he went, "Just wait a minute, just put a wee hair in there and shove that spring under your arse there, you got me." You know what I mean?
Yeah. I just, God, it's just ludicrous what the stuff that she comes up with, and that the damn jury bought. But
I
that's
know.
because Macy could sell popsicles to a, to a Eskimo. I hope that's not offensive. Anyway,
God,
so,
Rhonda.
well, some people get pissed off when I say pissed off, so you never know. I guess they don't have to stay and watch, right?
Well,
Anyway,
so much for getting the Eskimos to watch our show.
now I'm going to be getting a strike for sure. Channel, I offended the Eskimos. They're going to shut me down for racism. God.
No, we need to have some Eskimos on the panel. If you're an Eskimo and you want to be on the panel, just let us know.
And I'll retract my Eskimo statement about popsicles. I promise. I'll take it back. God. But as a result of that evidence, that hair evidence, Gilchrist concluded that, in her opinion, Mark Fowler and Bill Fox were in contact with the victim, John Barrier, prior to his death. So now, this I was hoping to have a bigger audience, and maybe someone when they join later. Macy had indicated before the trial the hair evidence was crucial to placing both of the defendants at the murder scene, but did it prove that both men were responsible for the killings? Well, how can you prove that? Well, you could get Sherry Culhane, or you could get any number of cops to plant, some kind of a bullet or bullet casing, or as a defense attorney, you could hire Skip Palahniuk, a forensic scientist from Chicago, as an expert witness. And that's just what the defense did. They hired Skip Palahniuk, who is a famous, we've seen him in, heard of him, and it was his son, I believe, that was in Ma'am 2. But Skip Palahniuk has been on several episodes of Forensic Files, and he was, just an expert in his field. And he examined the hairs. Watch out, Gilchrist. Skip Palahniuk's on the hairs, and he examined the hairs that Gilchrist matched to both of the defendants. And at trial, Palahniuk testified that the unknown hairs found on Barrier's body that Gilchrist matched to Mark Fowler's could have been from the suspect or the victim equally. Could have been from either one of them. And Palahniuk also disagreed with Gilchrist's conclusion that the hair found on Barrier's ring came from Billy Ray Fox. So Gilchrist admitted that her hair analysis had been rushed. Rushed my ass. It was not rushed. Uh-oh, are you okay, Alice?
Yes.
Please tell us.
That woman talks one load of shit, you know what I mean? She's got an excuse for everything. Oh, my work was rushed. Oh, it wasn't me, it was Bob Macy. Oh, it wasn't me, it was that. Oh my God, man.
Yeah. She does. She has an excuse for everything. Everything. She's got a finger pointing in a different direction, except for at her own self.
Right?
Or except for looking in the mirror. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's like, I didn't know if you were okay, because I'm not looking at the StreamYard screen. And I'm like, oh my God, what's happening to Alice? I'm glad you're okay. At least we can laugh at it, right?
Yeah.
So, in addition to Gilchrist's hair testimony, Macy presented a blood expert who testified that examinations showed blood present on the clothes worn by both defendants on the night of the murders, and those tests, his expert admitted, were presumptive and not conclusive. But just like Giger, making up his own DNA story in his closing argument, Macy did the same thing. So he said that not only could he not link the blood to any of the victims, but he could not even determine conclusively whether the blood was human or animal. Speaking of Palahniuk. Oh, so Bevel, who was from the OCPD, testified as an expert. So how do you think that was going to go? Certainly wasn't going to be, in Fowler and Fox's favor for sure. But he was an expert. He testified as an expert in blood spatter analysis, and he reconstructed the crime scene following what the state's theory was, that both of the boys had been present in the back storeroom and both were involved in murder. And so he figures out a scenario, who killed who, how, what, where, when, and put the spring under the body of the, he had it all worked out. But Fowler was alleged to have stabbed Barrier 9 times, but the knife, if you remember back, the knife that was used to stab Barrier had been wiped clean on a T-shirt that was in the back of Fox's possession that night, and was found in the back of his truck. And so on cross-examination, Bevel, the OCPD expert, concluded that it was possible, although not probable, that one person could have committed all 3 murders. What? It's possible, but not very likely that one person killed them, all 3 of them. Why would it not be possible? I don't, or, not probable, I mean. Anyway. So then they go on to talk about how complex blood spatter science and forensic science is, and just one little miscalculation can change the complete dynamics. And one of my favorite words in the English language, trajectory. I love saying that word. I don't know why. Just like I love saying Quantico. I don't know what the deal is, but 2 words that I love. Anyway.
Corroborate.
Oh, shut up. That one I don't love. I do not love that word ever anymore.
I must admit, I did have a wee chuckle when I heard you say corroborate.
Oh my God.
And chapter 8, because I could hear you going corroborate.
And when I see that word coming up, you guys don't know the pressure. Like I start sweating in my armpits because I'm like, oh my God. It's not that hard of a word. Jesus. And there's 2 R's in trajectory, but I never have a problem saying that word. Oh, good Lord. But they said they could only provide the blood evidence and things like that, the forensic science, as a theory and not a scientific fact. It can be useful. Blood spatter analysis can be useful in crime scene reconstruction during investigation or trials to show more vivid pictures of how a crime occurred, but not really. It's kind of junk science, really, in a sense nowadays, to to a degree. But Bob Macy used it as fact in this trial. Other than Skip Palahniuk, though, the defense didn't call any other witnesses during the guilt phase of the trial. They called that a tactical move, and they both declined to make a closing statement, both the defense counsel, and they said that was a tactical move to decline making the closing argument. So they but in his closing argument, Rowan, oh gosh, what was his first name? Jim Rowan, abrogated the mutual non-aggression pact, telling the jurors that Fox alone was responsible for the murders. What do you do, though? I mean, yeah, it's really easy to sit, 3 months before the trial. Yep, we're not gonna, we're both, we're not gonna attack each other. But then when lives are on the line, what do you do? I just can't imagine that situation, that position.
Exactly.
It's just sad. So after 2 hours of deliberation, they were found. Both the boys were found guilty on 3 counts of first-degree murder. And Billy Fox's attorney said, later that they didn't expect to be acquitted, but I think they were hoping that the jury was not going to find for death.
No, but a life sentence. I mean, give them a life sentence. No, the death penalty. You know what I mean? If you think that they're guilty of something, then fair enough. If the punishment's supposed to fit the crime. So if they've done a robbery and they've killed somebody, then life in prison. Why the death penalty? And not only that, 2 hours a deliberation.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be allowed. A jury should at least have to take a good few days to look at everything that's been put in front of them.
Right.
No, to me that sounds like they're just cherry picking what they want so that they can hurry up, get home, so that they can get home to their wife and have a beer, and you know what I mean? That's not a deliberation to me. That's them saying, right, do you agree? Aye. Do you agree? Aye. Do you agree? Right, okay, right, well, aye, we'll just say he's guilty. No bother looking at the evidence. You know? I mean, that's my opinion. That's how I'm looking at this. Because how can you decide on 2 people's life whether they deserve to be sentenced to death or no in 2 hours?
In 2 hours, yeah.
Have you
Yep.
noticed how a lot of cases go to the jury on a Friday afternoon?
Yeah.
I wonder what the statistics look like for, how long juries deliberate if they get the case on a Friday afternoon versus a Monday afternoon.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because Judge Collins, whatever, Chauvin's trial judge, everybody's rested. The state and the defense have rested, and they're not doing closing arguments until Monday.
Yeah.
So, and he said for that very reason, he doesn't want to do closing arguments on Friday and then have the jury sitting with that, all weekend long.
Right.
Before they go in. But yeah, I mean, I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah, there's a lot of Friday jury deliberations or jury handing overs.
Yeah, and when
It
it's
is
done
wrong.
like that on a Friday, people might have had Sunday dinners and family outings, and you know what I mean. So they're going to do that as quick as they can, so that they can get home for their Sunday family day out, or you know what I mean. So they're not going to take the time to deliberate properly like they should.
Yeah.
You know, because to me, the judge should have went 2 hours. No, I don't fucking think so. Get back in there. You know what I mean?
I know. But when everybody's in everybody else's back pockets,
Yeah.
everybody agreed with it except for defense,
Or
of
the
course.
Jews are getting brought pizza.
Yep, they're just gonna bring them some beer and pizza and let them just hang out for a little while, party up. Oh, God, we know way too much corruption in the system. It's really sad. So, Jim Rowan, Mark, nope, I said that wrong. So Macy went in just before Macy went into the courtroom to do his closing arguments during the death penalty phase. He saw Billy Ray Fox's dad in the hallway. His name was Sam Fox, and he was a local firefighter. And I think that him and Macy had kind of become chummy, friendly, cordial during the course of the trial. Even though Fox knew that the judge was, or that Macy was seeking the death penalty for his son, they, for whatever reason, they became respectful of one another in conversations and whatnot. And so Macy saw Billy Fox's dad outside the courtroom, and he said to him, quote, "I'd rather you not go in there. I'm going to say some pretty bad things about your son." end quote. And then his Sam Fox's response was, "You've got a job to do. Go in there and do it." And I'm just like, oh my God. I just, that just another tug at my heart. I was like, oh, and I get it. He did. He had a job to do, but that was dirty. He was so dirty. And this
Yep.
Fox guy was just like, yeah, I know it sucks, but go in and do what you got to do. And I was, whatever. I couldn't have been that decent.
No.
Yeah. So, of course, they have people to talk for them, and I guess what we now call kind of like victim impact statements, but they also, oftentimes the defendants are allowed to have people speak for them as well. And so that was all done. And but Sam Fox, the father of Billy Fox, he got on the stand and he pleaded for his son's life. He said, "I love my son. I know he's done wrong and needs to be punished. The only thing I could ask is not to put him to death." And I don't know, I guess it's a pretty big ask, but at the same time, it is a man's life that we're talking about. And remember, he was the one who had no criminal history. And so when Jim Rowan spoke on behalf of Mark Fowler, he said, "Let the carnage end, choose life." And he urged the jury, stop the killing. Don't sentence him to death, you know, sentence him to life, but don't kill him. And during the closing arguments, Macy told the jury to ignore any mitigating circumstances. Why these defendants are what they are may be a good field of research, but it's no mitigation or justification for what they did. And I agree. But I don't know if it's always been a thing, but it's very common to, how you do a victimology on a victim. Well, I don't know what it's called for the defendant, but, those are mitigate. Sometimes the way a person is raised, or, just the family, the home life, the lack of supervision, no father, whatever the things are, sometimes extreme cases of abuse, they're not excuses. It doesn't allow people to go out and do the crimes, but it at least puts a amount of compassion into the mind of people who are considering executing this person. And, I think it should be taken into consideration, but not Bob Macy. um nope, it's no mitigation or justification for what they did, and he's right, but that, it doesn't mean that they can't be considered. But he says, if this isn't a crime that deserves the death penalty, I don't know what is.
Just like you said in every other one, that death penalty case that he ever
Exactly.
fucking done. If this is a case for the death penalty, then this is it.
Yeah, he does too. I was just gonna say,
And this one,
like
and this one, and this one.
and yes, absolutely. So following the death penalty phase, the jury deliberated for 3 hours, and like I said, they both got the death penalty. So shortly after they were sentenced to death row, a mail carrier walked into the Edmond post office and shot 14 of his coworkers dead and wounded 7 others. Bob Macy was at that crime scene too, but he wasn't able to prosecute the killer, Patrick Henry Sherrill, who was concluded was one of the worst mass murderers in the nation's history by shooting himself to death. And I believe that was the first. Is that the first? Is that where the term postal came from? She went postal. That
Going
was the first.
yeah.
Yeah, because that was the first. Yeah, and I remember that. I just, I had no idea that who this Bob Macy person was or anything until I was reading this. But yeah, so he didn't get to. But he was, he was pretty bummed, I guess, that he didn't get to try that guy. He wanted to try that guy and, to give him the death penalty, but he couldn't because the guy shot himself. So Jim Fowler in 1994, Jim Fowler's son Jimbo died in a motorcycle accident. Both of the boys, Mark and Jimbo, were adopted. And their adoptive mother had died when both of the boys were teenagers. So there was already a lot of tragedy in this family. And so now Jim Fowler is, he's got one son dead, one son on death row, a dead wife. But Mark had known that his biological mother had abandoned him when he was young. And then the only other mother that he ever knew died. So he just really had his dad at that, when he was in prison on death row. But Jim Fowler had remarried in 1980. So there was a mother figure there. But Jim and Ann Fowler, his stepmother, they just couldn't bring themselves to visit him at the prison. And it was just too hard for him. And Jim Fowler said, "You can't imagine how you feel when your baby boy has been convicted of something like that, and you feel so shameful, it just kills you." And I just thought, God, and again, they were devout Catholics. So, but eventually, Jim and Ann Fowler came to accept the fact that their son had been involved in this horrible homicide and had been sentenced to death. And they did start going regularly to visit Mark. And they became they became advocates, and they were more involved in the appeals process. And both of them were hoping that once the case got out of the state courts, that Mark might have his sentence reduced. But as is very common with the OCCA or the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals, both of the convictions were upheld. Both Fox and Fowler's convictions were upheld. However, in the Fox decision, Billy Fox's, the court noted that while Joyce Gilchrist had admitted that an individual could not be positively identified by hair evidence, she went on to testify that, in her opinion, Mark Fowler and Bill Fox were in contact with John Barrier prior to death. And even though the court had noted, that this opinion lacked any kind of scientific weight, so
She does a lot of that opinion shit.
she does, and she was, I believe, earlier in the book when they started talking about Boschel being, assigned to the lab, it was being proven not scientifically, but by other more real, legitimate scientists, that you can't base that stuff on your opinion. Your opinion doesn't matter. It has to be the evidence that you base your testimony on. But it was always came down to her opinion.
Well, it's the same way we're talking about learning bad habits. Elaine Taylor did the same thing in Daniel's trial.
Yes.
Yep. And who did she learn it from? Gilchrist.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
we're going to see when her deposition is unsealed, we're going to see, how she stands up for what she's been trained to do, how she stands up for the culture, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. So they go on. Gilchrist, would qualify her statements about hair, saying that, the only thing she would say was that she could not exclude the defendant. Another time she would testify that the hairs were absolute matches. Many other experts who have studied her testimonies over the years have been able to determine why she would testify differently in cases. So now here's a name we're not that familiar with that's coming up all of a sudden in this book. David Prater. Oh, wait, who's David Prater? Why does that sound familiar? Oh, because he's the current jackass in Oklahoma. But David Prater.
Outgoing DA.
Yes, outgoing DA. Fingers crossed, right?
Prater the Prat.
Huh?
Prater the Prat.
Yeah. Yep. He handled the DA's internal investigation of Gilchrist and said that in some cases, Gilchrist would be asked by the prosecutor whether she could say the hairs were definite matches, and she would answer no. But in other cases, she would not be asked specific questions by the prosecution, and she would not add any qualifiers to her statements. And then it was years later when Captain Byron Basho asked Gilchrist about problems with her testimony in the Fowler and Fox case. What did she do, Alice? She said it was
Wasn't it
Bob
me?
Macy made me do it. She blamed Bob Macy.
Yeah.
Everybody check on Alice, make sure she's not choking in there. Oh, no, but it's so true. She just was a blamer, man. Everything that was wrong was somebody else's fault. Everything.
Yeah.
And then she said, quote, "I did give my opinion uh, based on the results of my examination of the evidence that both defendants, Fox and Fowler, were in direct contact with the victim. Although it was deemed appropriate conduct by the Court of Criminal Appeals, I was merely responding to the prosecutor's questions." Such a loser.
Oh my
Oh my
God.
goodness. I feel like somebody's popped into the live here. Oh, hey, TTM fangirl. Nice to see you. Oh, yeah, I get it. Trust me, I know. There's not enough time in a day to cover all the cases that we all like to talk about. Well, thank you for coming, though. I appreciate that. Um, yeah, ma'am is definitely enough for 10 people. So yeah, um, Gilchrist the Blamer. We have to find a name for her. Um,
It
so
wasn't me.
it wasn't me. Start calling her Shaggy, huh? So in the 10th circuit in January of 2000, the 10th Circuit Court upheld Fox and Fowler's convictions. And in a concurring opinion, Judge David Ebel criticized Macy for improperly linking Fox and Fowler's confession, but stated that there was still strong independent evidence of Mr. Fowler's participation in the crimes. Therefore, Macy's error, though improper, did not render the trial fundamentally unfair. That sounds like something that was said about a damn freaking secret gosh damn hearing, right?
Aye.
It was
It
wrong,
sure
but it
does.
wouldn't have
Oh
changed
my
the outcome.
God.
Just
That
oh
is
my,
the same verbiage.
it really is. It is. Gosh. Oh, thank you, TTM fangirl. We appreciate that. Sometimes we're just plain silly, or I'm just plain silly. You missed it a few minutes ago. I thought Alice was choking to death, but it turns out she was just laughing her ass off. So, sometimes we're just purely entertaining. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. It's very nice. So, oh gosh, eventually, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear the case, and all of their appeals were exhausted, and Fox and Fowler were given execution dates. And Attorney General at the time, Drew Edmondson, asked the Court of Criminal Appeals to set the executions on the same day to save the victims' families, because that would be a kind human thing to do, from having to endure the trauma twice. And the court declined and gave them separate dates, 2 days apart, 2 freaking days apart. Nope, not only are we not going to be nice and humane and let the families just get it all done at once, but we're going to set those executions 2 damn days apart. It's just,
Yeah.
how much more cruel can you get?
They wouldn't let them have a fucking trial separately, but they're quite happy to execute them separately.
Yeah. It just boggles the mind.
It does.
It's just crazy. So Fowler was scheduled to die on January 23rd of 2001, and Fox was sentenced or set for January 25th of 2001. So the question is, Mark Furman's asking, did Fowler deserve the death penalty? And he says it's hard for him to judge because of his conversations with Jim Fowler and the sympathy that he felt for him. Because as Mark Furman was investigating all of this stuff, he grew to really care about and respect Jim Fowler and and his wife for what they were going through. And so he said, it's hard to say based on the conversations that he'd had with Jim Fowler and the sympathy that he felt for him. But he said, trying to be as objective as possible, I would have to say that the evidence didn't prove Fowler was directly involved in the murder. And even though his involvement in the robbery might have constituted a murder committed during the act of a felony, it seems to be a very narrow reading of the law. Again, coming from an former LAPD cop who strongly believed in the death penalty, that was an interesting comment. Oh my God. The investigating detectives could have corroborated
Yay!
could have corroborated or disproved Fowler's claims that they did not directly participate in the murders. But using Gilchrist's hair evidence and Bevel's crime scene reconstruction, the detectives felt like they had proven Fowler's involvement. But again, Mark Furman was not convinced.
They didn't corroborate.
I was going to say it, Katie, try and put it off, but I thought, no, I better not.
God, I swear to God, but I can say Suxamononics. Oh, nope, never mind. Can't say that one anymore either. Okay, I'll just keep reading. Or paraphrasing, I should say. I'm not reading anything, I'm paraphrasing. So anyway, they could have offered Fowler a polygraph and used those results, whether they were pass or fail, to help Macy decide whether or not Fowler should have been tried for first-degree murder. But we have to remember, Macy didn't want to know any of that. He just wanted them all. Both convicted of murder. So, there was let's see. There was a part I didn't. A polygraph could have helped determine whether he planned to participate in the robbery without any thought of murder, or whether he had gone into the supermarket ready to kill. And he said, if he could convince me that he did not have the intent to kill, I would recommend to a DA that Mark Fowler be charged with armed robbery and as an accessory to murder. But that was not done, clearly. And so while they were awaiting the clemency hearing, Mark Fowler said that he hoped the governor would reduce the sentence to life without parole, of course. And Jim Fowler said, quote, "We would have been happier than hell if he had been given life without parole." And he said, "I told people, God damn it, if I ever get Mark off death row, I'll kill him myself," end quote. And I remember when my kids would, I'd have a kid come up missing, and I would just say something like, or come late. I don't mean missing, but like coming home late from school, or something like that. He better be late, sitting on the side of the road with both knees bloody and not able to walk, or I'm gonna beat him myself. Kind of like that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And so I just thought, oh man, his poor heart. I just felt so sad for him. So there were more than 200 of Mark Fowler's family and friends and supporters that showed up for his clemency hearing, and they have space limitations, and so only 62 were allowed inside the room. And at the hearing, the Oklahoma top Roman Catholic clergyman pleaded for Fowler's life, and he said, "I am totally sorry." Mark Fowler said, quote, "I am totally sorry for my role in this tragedy," end quote. Um, when And then he said, quote, I never ever planned to be part of a murder," end quote. And Of course, the family members of the victims, they were able to get the last word. And um, uh, Frank Cast, who was the brother of Rick Cast, said, quote, "In my heart, I can't forgive these boys. After the executions, maybe I can start to forgive them," end quote. And then, of course, they were shot down in the clemency hearing, and the execution was not stayed, but was going to continue. And Jim and Ann Fowler, Mark's parents, they spent the entire last week at McAllister visiting Mark, as much time as they possibly could. And uh, quote, this is Jim Fowler, quote, "One day we were kept waiting for about an hour and a half," Jim remembered. "When Mark finally showed up on the other side of the visitor's window, Jim was angry. He asked where Mark had been. And Mark said, quote, 'Pop, I just received the last rites of the church and made my last confession and took communion,' end quote." And Jim Fowler says that he told Mark Furman that he remembered the look on Mark's face was beautiful. And oh God, I got chills. This is going to be the hard part for me to get through, you guys. He said that the look on his face was beautiful and that there was a glow that seemed to be coming from him. And he said that it passed over us and we felt better because he felt better. Um, Fowler's last confession was private. Um, Previously, his uncle, whose name was Father Greg Gear, was a Catholic priest, and he asked Mark point blank whether he had killed anybody, and Mark said no, that he hadn't. And Jim Fowler believes that his son was telling the truth. And Jim Fowler said, "You don't lie on your deathbed. If you have any fear of God at all, you're going to come clean." Um, oh gosh, Mark told his father that he didn't want him to watch the execution, but Jim felt that in truth, Mark did want him there. He said, "No son is going to ask his dad to watch the state kill him." Mark had told his father that the guards and administrators at the prison didn't like him, but Jim found out later that that wasn't true. He said, quote, "He had made some friends with the people who worked there. He hadn't caused them any trouble, but it was their job to kill him," end quote. And
That
then
is wicked.
huh?
Yeah.
Wicked. That's wicked.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll probably read a little more than paraphrasing through this because I just feel like it won't do it any justice if I don't.
Yeah.
And so Jim was still talking to Mark Furman. He said, quote, "I said, boy, if you were dying from any other cause, cancer or AIDS or a car wreck or anything, I'd be beside you. I would not abandon him. I would not leave him there to go through that moment of his life alone." Um, Although witnessing his son's execution was the most painful moment of his life, Jim Fowler said that he would do it again tomorrow because Mark needed us. And I don't think I could look myself in the mirror again had I not gone down there. Um, and Mark Furman says that when Jim Fowler told him that, he said it was very brave of him. And Mark Fowler said, or not Mark, Jim Fowler said, "It's not brave, it's what parents are for." On the day of Mark's execution, Jim and Ann visited with him the whole day. They stayed with him for his last meal. He had ordered a cheeseburger, a bacon cheeseburger, 2 orders of onion rings, a grilled chicken sandwich, and a cherry limeade. It just the simple things, just the simple
Yep.
things that he wanted to appreciate before his execution.
Yep.
And yeah. Um, Jim had told his son that there were 200 people outside the prison holding a candlelight vigil for him. Earlier that day, 7 people had been arrested outside the offices of the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board for protesting the execution. Before he said goodbye, Mark asked his father to put his hand on his head in the witness viewing room so that he would be able to recognize him through the glass. At 5 p.m., Mark made some last telephone calls. Then he was led into the execution chamber. Jim and Ann Fowler sat in the front row of chairs. When the blinds came up, Jim saw his son lying on the gurney. Jim put his hand on his head. So did every other family member. Mark looked back, and when he saw that, he settled down, Jim said. Asked if he had any last words, Mark began to recite the Hail Mary. His family prayed along with him. Mark kept repeating the Hail Mary as the drugs rushed into his veins. And then he was silent, his head slumped down, his eyes closed. At 9:07 p.m., Mark Andrew Fowler was pronounced dead. Jim Fowler said, quote, "In a way, Mark's death was beautiful. During the 15 years he waited to die, Mark had a chance to make peace with everyone, particularly his family. There was not one stone unturned, not one I love you that went unsaid," end quote. And 2 days later, Billy Ray Fox was put on the gurney. And when asked if he had any last word, Fox said no. He smiled at his family members, then his eyes went glassy. He looked up at the ceiling and his head slowly drooped. Billy Ray Fox was declared dead at 9:06 p.m. Mark Fowler and Billy Ray Fox were both executed before the scandal surrounding Joyce Gilchrist broke. After the Gilchrist grand jury was convened, Fowler wrote a letter to the office for U.S. attorneys offering to testify, and he never heard back from them. And before Mark was executed, Jim Fowler promised his son that he would devote the rest of his life to fighting the death penalty. And at the time this book was written, Jim serves on the board of the Oklahoma Coalition Against the Death Penalty and is involved in several lobbying campaigns to change Oklahoma statutes concerning the death penalty. And he remains vigil in, participating in vigils and protests against state executions. And he said, quote, "I am against the death penalty forevermore. That's a promise I made my son." To speak with Jim Fowler and see the anguish and grief in his eyes is to see another side of the death penalty. Jim Fowler did nothing wrong, yet he is a victim. Mark Furman says that Jim Fowler is a very warm and friendly man. He has a sense of humor, which had survived all the tragedies of his life, and that his love for his son was very evident. Yet he never makes excuses for what Mark did. He said, "Several times when I spoke to him, he referred to Mark in the present tense as if he were still alive. The pain Jim felt was still with him when we spoke. It will be with him always, yet he is never bitter. He accepts what happened with grace and humility, as much as he wishes that it never occurred." Mark Furman said, "I hope that if something half as terrible happened to my family, I would be as brave as Jim Fowler. He has a courage that is rare and beautiful. It is the same courage that I've seen in Dorothy Moxley, whose 15-year-old daughter was killed, and her murder went unsolved for 23 years. It's not the courage of the street brawls or gunfights. It's a moral courage, the ability to withstand the worst that can happen and not give in to hatred or despair." Without trying to convince me that capital punishment was wrong, Jim Fowler made me look at it from a different perspective, that of a parent whose child faces death. The parents of the condemned follow each step of the trial and appellate process all the way up to the day when their child is executed. The death is planned in great detail and well in advance. For the parents, the grief is drawn out over years and lasts a lifetime. There's no closure for Jim Fowler or any other family member of someone who has been executed. It remains a nightmare that never ends. And then I'm really sorry, guys. I really didn't think I thought I was gonna be able to do this. Anyway, he said that after he spoke with Jim Fowler, Mark Furman wondered how he would react if it was his son facing the death penalty. And he said, he wondered, would I be able to handle the anger and the shame, the pain and the grief? And he said, like a lot of us before we had children said, or at least I know I did, that it's easy to blame the parents of criminals, or to blame them for the way that their children turned out. And Mark Furman said he had ideas about what kind of behavior I would or would not tolerate as a parent. Now I realize that no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, your children will become their own individual selves. All you can do is guide them, support them, and love them. He does, says that he knows that no matter what his children did, that he would never abandon his son, no matter what he did, whatever he might do. He said, I would forgive him as Jim Fowler forgave Mark. And if I could forgive my own son, why can't I forgive someone else's son? That, for me, is the question at the core of the death penalty. It is a punishment of revenge as final as any judgment can ever be, leaving no room for compassion or forgiveness. When I was a cop, I only had compassion for the victims of crimes. I could not allow myself to feel anything but contempt for those who were responsible. Jim Fowler helped me realize that it was possible to feel compassion even for criminals, which is right and necessary, yet only makes the rendering of justice more difficult. Sorry, I read most of that. Oh, I'm really sorry. I did not mean to
No,
have that
no,
little
you're
meltdown.
absolutely fine. I
It's
mean,
just the way it is. I'm never going to be able to read that
it is.
without feeling that.
Yeah,
Anyway, I just felt like I wanted to read it because I felt like it was really special
yeah,
and really tender and really powerful. And with everything, you guys, that we've studied and researched and looked at, and that we continue to do, all the ugliness that we're seeing and the lies and the corruption, I just felt like those last pages were really tender moments, and I just thought it would be a good way to, even with my tears, it'd be a really good way to end this particular chapter.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anybody else have any comments or questions from the chatters? A couple of chatters left. All right. In that case, so that I don't continue to keep blubbering, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to sign off. It's been 2 hours. Um, and so I appreciate those of you who stuck around. We will be back on Tuesday with more chats, and it's just going to be a surprise because there's so much going on. Who knows? But before we come into our live next Tuesday, we'll have a plan for you guys. And until then, please like, subscribe, share. Um, let everybody know that know about our channel, and get them to help us fight for freedom for Daniel. Until next time, peace out.